In today's video, I'll be answering the question of who will win the state of Michigan in the 2024 presidential election. Now first off, let's look at a little bit of political history in this swing state. Now historically, the state of Michigan has voted for the Democratic Party in virtually every election since 1992 when Bill Clinton was elected president. The only exception being 2016, where Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary Clinton, narrowly lost the state of Michigan to Donald Trump by 0.22%. This was a razor-thin margin and the closest date of the 2016 presidential election. Now with that being said, you might ask yourself the question, why is the state of Michigan being discussed? After all, historically, the state of Michigan is incredibly blue. Even in 2000, where the Democratic nominee Al Gore lost the election, he was still able to carry the state of Michigan by over 5 percentage points. Well, the answer is coalitions have changed, and Michigan is extremely competitive in this election cycle. Now, another question you might ask is, why is the state of Michigan so imperative to the success of both parties? And the answer is very straightforward. If Kamala Harris is able to win the state of Michigan, her chances of winning the presidency does greatly improve. That is because the state of Michigan, alongside the states of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, have voted for the same presidential candidate dating back all the way to 1988. In 1988, the state of Wisconsin voted for Michael Dukakis, while Michigan and Pennsylvania voted for George W. Bush. But ever since then, they have voted for the same candidate, generally the Democratic candidate, except 2016. So if Kamala Harris is actually able to follow that trend, win the state of Michigan while also carrying the states of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, she's at 269 electoral college votes. And based on numbers, we can see that Nebraska's second is likely to go for her, and she would be the president right then and there. Well, by contrast, if Donald Trump is able to win the state of Michigan, that would be excellent news for his campaign. That's because dating all the way back to 1996, the state of Michigan has been the bluest of any of these competitive states currently labeled in gray on your map. So if he's able to win Michigan, it can be anticipated that he'll also carry all of these toss-up states, which obviously gets him well beyond the 270 electoral college votes needed to be the next president of the United States. So as you can see, Michigan is imperative to the victory of both sides. Now let's start looking at 2024 and some of the fundamentals. Now, one of the fundamentals I generally look at is poly market, where right now the Republican share is at 56 cents, while the Democratic share is at 45 cents. What that means is that 11% more shares are going to the Republican Party as opposed to the Democratic Party. That is very significant. At the start of this month here, around September 21st, Democrats led Republicans almost 2-1. By now, it's actually Republicans that are leading Democrats by double digits. And that shows that people are now believing that the Republican Party is able to win. Another reason that this is significant is that people actually put money into poly market. And what that means is that they're not inclined to lie because they don't want to lose money. There's nothing to lie when you kind of lie with your mouth, but there's a lot to lie when you're actually losing money. There's a lot on the line, and people are generally quite honest on poly market. And thus, this is a great sign for the Republican Party. According to polling right now, though, Kamala Harris still maintains a narrow lead. While you might say that that is good news here for Kamala Harris, in reality, it simply isn't. As you can see right now, Kamala Harris is up by 0.5%. However, the trajectory is that the Democratic lead has been thinning from about 2 to 3% in favor of Kamala Harris, now to down to 0.5%, which is well within the margin of error and very competitive. Additionally, in 2020, Joe Biden actually had the lead in the state of Michigan by 8% according to the polls, and he only won the state by less than 3. So in 2020, the state had about a 5% polling error, and if that happens again, Trump would easily carry the state of Michigan. Now moving on to my analysis here. In 2020, Joe Biden was able to win because he was able to get very high numbers in areas like Detroit and Washington County, which really boosted his numbers of Democratic numbers across the state, and he was also able to do quite well in suburban areas like Oakland, which is definitely more white collar. People generally make a lot of income in Oakland County, as well as these more blue collar areas like Macomb County, the auto industry. These were all areas, suburban areas in particular, as well as some of these urban areas. Joe Biden was able to drive up turnout, but he was also able to kind of drive up those numbers. If you just scroll down a little bit here, you can see that Joe Biden did improve in the more populated, densely populated regions across the state. For example, Wayne County, this was the largest county in the state of Michigan and still is by population. You can see that Biden slightly improved. In Oakland County, he improved by about 6%. In Macomb County, he improved by 3.5%. In Kent County, with the fourth largest population of any county across the state, he was actually able to improve by more than 9%, which is really impressive, and that is why Joe Biden was able to win the state of Michigan on the presidential level. Now, those voters really drove it up for Joe Biden, and that is why he won the state by 155,000 votes. Now, that 155,000 vote lead for Joe Biden may seem insurmountable from some people who don't actually watch politics. However, it certainly is surmountable, especially for a candidate like Donald Trump. In 2016, he was able to carry the state against Hillary Clinton by about 10,000 votes by doing really well in the rural areas, as well as kind of compressing some of Hillary Clinton's margins, as well as turnout in the more urban areas like Wayne County, Washtenaw County, as well as some of these suburban areas. So now the question is, will the 2024 election be like 2020, 2016, or somewhere in between, or something that actually looks even more favorable for Donald Trump? Right now, I do currently predict that Donald Trump will carry the state of Michigan by roughly 20,000 votes. And I think that he'll do essentially better everywhere, except one county being Kent County. This is a heavily blue trending area, but otherwise I expect Donald Trump to do better. And there are several reasons for that prediction. Firstly, Trump is someone who is able to do exceptionally well in the rural areas. We've seen that in 2020, despite the fact that he was actually not able to do that well nationwide. He lost a popular vote by 4 million more votes than he did in 2020. He still made pretty substantial gains in some of the rural areas. And in 2016, you saw that in many of the rural areas, for example, in the state of Iowa, you can see that very well. This was a Obama plus 7 state, and it voted for Donald Trump by 9 points because he was able to do really well in some of these more rural areas. And not just a state like Iowa, you could go to any of the Great Plains states, go to Missouri, go to Illinois, go to Kentucky, go to Indiana. Those all show signs of how Donald Trump was able to do really well with the rural areas and why I think he'll improve there. Now, that kind of explains why I do not believe Kamala Harris will do well for rural voters. Now going to suburbanites. Suburbanites were the key of Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election, as well as the state of Michigan. I've just showed you Oakland County, Kent County, how much they trended towards the Democratic Party. However, this time round, I expect those trends to actually reverse in favor of the Republican Party, because Joe Biden is the incumbent in office, and due to high inflation, as well as some people just not really liking the economy, due to the fact that their groceries are going up 25%, if not more in some instances, these white-collar voters, as well as some of these blue-collar voters, in some of these suburban areas like Macomb, that's a more blue-collar area, or Oakland, a more white-collar area, these are all voters who are going to be turned down by the Joe Biden administration, and as a result, these Democratic voters are either going to, a few of them are going to vote for Trump, and some of them are just going to stay home and not vote at all, kind of hampering Kamala Harris's numbers. Additionally, Kamala Harris is just not doing very well with some of these minority voters, despite the fact that she is a racial minority herself. And the problem is, if she's not able to do well with minority voters, she's also not going to be able to do well with white voters, because some voters still want to vote for a candidate that's their own race, and Kamala Harris being racial minority certainly doesn't help her with white voters, and doesn't help her with minority voters either, if you just look at some of the minority voter polling, which is kind of why I don't think she's going to do well with the suburban areas. Now finally, the urban areas of Washtenaw County and Wayne County. These areas will also be extremely problematic for Kamala Harris. Washtenaw County has a lot of college grads that recently graduated, and Wayne County has a lot of Arab Americans, and those are two groups of voters that Kamala Harris has already struggled with. That is because of the Israel-Hamas crisis. A lot of these younger voters in Washtenaw and the Arab American population, which is quite dominant in Wayne County, it's the county that has the largest Arab American population in terms of percentage of any major city in the United States. And what happens is that these voters are not satisfied with Joe Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war because they perceived him as too pro-Israel, and they're not happy about that. And the problem is, although Kamala Harris has tried to distance herself with Joe Biden, a lot of these voters are simply not going to buy that because she is the vice president under Joe Biden, and there's really no way for you to distance yourself from that. For example, if you look at Arab Americans, right, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are virtually tied 42 to 41. In fact, former President Donald Trump actually has a 1% lead. But Joe Biden actually got 59% of the Arab American vote to Donald Trump, who got like 38%. That was a 20% margin in favor of Biden. This time round, it's actually Trump who has a 1% margin. That's going to hurt you a lot nationwide, but especially in a state like Michigan, where Arab Americans are a pretty big group of the voting bloc. And again, young voters in Washtenaw County, you're going to see depressed turnout. Younger voters are generally less likely to vote either way because they're people who, are more idealistic and they don't like to support any political parties in general. And something like this could greatly damage the Democratic reputation in the state of Michigan and in Washtenaw County. And what you're going to see is that Kamala Harris is not going to do well with the urban areas, the suburban areas, or the rural areas at all. And that is kind of why I believe that the state of Michigan will vote for Donald Trump. Now, of course, this is not set in stone. A 20,000 vote margin is incredibly narrow. It's not something that's completely unresistible, and Kamala Harris could still pull out a victory. But if my prediction is correct, which I currently think I will be right, I think there's about a 58 to 60% chance that Donald Trump wins the state of Michigan. He's essentially set to win the presidential election. And in one of my recent prediction videos as well, I did have Donald Trump winning the state of Pennsylvania. So with that, he's at 253 in my prediction videos, and he's almost there to winning the election. Anyways, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.